Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Beitzah Daf contains one Mishnah near the end of the daf. The beginning of the daf is discussing a comparison between the halacha that one is allowed to move boxes or containers of fruits off his roof in order to save them from dripping water. We want to compare that to the halacha that you're allowed to clear out boxes of fruits from a storehouse in order to use it as a base medrash or to serve your guests. The one wants to compare these two halachos. Tomorrow we'll bring up three halachos and see if they're comparable between the two cases, if they exist in the two cases or if they exist in only one of them. Tomorrow we'll then introduce a machlokes about kli nitl tzarech davar ha'asar. You're allowed to move a non-muksa object for the sake of helping a muksa object. And tomorrow we'll bring a number of proofs from our Mishnah and from some other Mishnahs to how we rule in that case. The Gemara will then discuss halachos of graf shalrei, when you're allowed to create a situation where something is disgusting and therefore you're allowed to move it out of the way even though it's muktzah on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Then we'll get to the Mishnah, which will teach us the halachos of permitted or possibly even mitzvahs, things which Chazal made gzeras against on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So let's begin. We've been discussing the Mishnah. The last Mishnah we've seen said you are allowed to lower boxes of fruits off your roof through the skylight on Yom Tov but not on Shabbos. The Gemara has compared that to the case of moving crates, containers of fruit out of a storehouse in order to be able to use the storehouse for a base medrash or to serve your guests. The Gemara wants to know, are these halachos the same? So the Gemara brings three halachos that we find in one of the other of these cases. The Gemara wants to know, can I compare it to the other case? The first halacha is the halacha of you should not clear a storehouse out fully, because when you expose the floor, you may find that the floor is uneven. You may come to smooth out the floor. Whoever wants to know, that's a restriction which we have in the case of clearing out a storehouse. Does that apply to clearing the containers from your roof? Do we also say that you can't clear those containers from your roof or not? You shouldn't clear them all from your roof lest you smooth out the floor. Next halacha is the halacha that when moving the containers of fruits from your roof, you're only allowed to move it into the structure, into the house. Not allowed to move it from roof to roof. One wants to know, does that restriction apply to the case of the storehouses or as well, that you can't move them from one building to another building, even if they're right near each other? And the third halacha was that in clearing off the house, we said you're only allowed to lower them through the skylight. You cannot send it off the side through a window with a rope or a ladder. The Gemara wants to know if that restriction applies to storehouses as well. Now the Gemara notes that you really can't learn one from the other, because there's reasons why each one should be stricter and there's reasons why each one should be more lenient. The halacha of the base medrash could potentially be stricter because that halacha is set on Shabbos, and Shabbos may be more stringent. On the other hand, it may be more lenient because Shabbos we are more comfortable making relaxed rules because people will realize that it's Shabbos and they will not be mezalzel on Shabbos. Comes to Yom Tov, if you start relaxing the rules, people may be being mezalzel. On the other hand, there's the svar of bittul beis hamedrash. There's a very important reason to clear out that storehouse. You need to use that as a base medrash. You don't have that in the case of the roof where you want to save the fruits. There is, though, another factor there, and that is that you have a monetary loss that's being caused by the dripping on the fruits, which are rotting. So we can't really learn one from the other in any of these halachas because of all these factors. Okay, now the Gemara quotes Ula, who says that you are not only allowed to save fruits from dripping, you are allowed to save bricks. Now, bricks are muktzah, so Ula says you're allowed to save them. And he's referring to a line in the Mishnah that said not that you're going to move the bricks are muktzah, but you can cover the bricks. You can cover them with something to save them from the dripping water. Now, the bricks were made out of hardened clay. When they got wet, they rotted. So one says that Rav Yitzchak disagrees, and Rav Yitzchak says, no, it's only fruits that you're allowed to cover. Our Mishnah said fruits, not anything else. You're only allowed to move fruits. Now, Rav Yitzchak goes in line with another opinion that he has elsewhere, which is that ein kli nitl tzarech davar hanitl. You're only allowed to move an object on Shabbos which is not muktzah, if you intended to use it for something which is not muktzah. If you want to save a muktzah object, you cannot move a non-muktzah object for that sake. So you wouldn't be allowed to take a non-muktzah sheet or clear something and spread it over bricks which are muktzah. So this is the machlokes between Ula and Rav Yitzchak. Can you spread a sheet over muktzah objects to save them or not? So the Gemara says, okay, let's try a couple of proofs from our Mishnah. First of all, our Mishnah is only talking about fruits. That would seem to imply that it's only fruits which are not muktzah that you're allowed to save. A muktzah object like bricks, you're not allowed to save. Says no, maybe it only mentions fruits because that's what was said in the first halacha where you're actually moving the fruits away. That was the first halacha in the Mishnah. That halacha only works when it's something which is not muktzah, like fruits. So we kept the case of fruits in our next discussion of halacha, but really it could apply to muktzah objects like bricks as well. So Gemara says that's unlikely because the Seifa also says that you can also spread sheets over jugs of wine and oil to save them. That didn't appear in the first case in the Mishnah. Why would we add this in over here? Obviously, we're not just reflecting the items that were used in the first case in the Mishnah. We specifically said fruits and jugs of wine and oil and not muktzah objects. Whereas no, actually these jugs of wine and oil are muktzah. We're talking about where they're tevel. They have not had a meiser taken from them, and therefore they are muktzah. And if you think about it, it has to be that way. Otherwise, why would we bother mentioning them? We already mentioned fruits. What's the difference between fruits and wine or oil? It's all the same. Must be to tell me that even though they're tevel and they're muktzah, you're still allowed to cover them up to save them. Versus that's not really a proof. It could just be that we mention wine and oil because that's less of a loss. So it's a bigger chiddush that even though there's less of a loss, they don't really get destroyed by dripping water. You're still allowed to save them by covering them up. Okay, the Gemara now tries some proofs from other cases. One more from our Mishnah. It said in our Mishnah you're allowed to put a kli to save dripping water. So why are you allowed to do that? The water that you're saving is muktzah. It's dirty water that's dripping off the roof. Somewhere says no, it's talking about clean water that you could drink. Not necessarily a proof that you're allowed to save muktzah water with a kli. Okay, now we go to other Mishnayos. We have a case that says you're allowed to spread a curtain over bricks. So you see, you are allowed to move a non-muktzah curtain for the sake of saving bricks which are muktzah. Someone says this is talking about bricks that aren't muktzah, perhaps. It's talking about bricks that are left over from building. They're already nice and smooth. Therefore you could sit on them. Okay, then where's the next proof? We have a Mishnah that says you're allowed to spread a cloth over stones. Now stones, you're not going to sit on stones. Someone says no, this is talking about small stones that are pointy at one end. You could use them for cleaning oneself after using the restroom, therefore they're not muktzah. Gemara's next move is from a beehive. We have a brayso that says you're allowed to spread a cloth or a mat over a beehive on Shabbos to protect it from the sun or from the rain. So again, a beehive is muktzah, and you're allowed to spread something over it. So the Gemara says, and the brayso ends off, and it says as long as you do not have in mind to trap the bees. So Gemara says it's not a problem. We're talking about a beehive that's not muktzah because there's honey in it. So Gemara says honey in it. It says to protect it from the sun or from the rain. There's no honey in beehives during the rainy season. So at the end, the Gemara will answer, we're not talking about the rainy season. We're talking about the springtime when it sometimes is rainy and sometimes is sunny, and there's honey in it. You could have both rain and sun. You might assume that rain means the rainy season and sun means the sunny season. The Gemara says no, it could be that there's a season that has both of them and there's honey there. But before that, the Gemara tries other answers. The Gemara says, okay, we're referring to during the rainy season, you still have some honey left in the hive. Even though the honey's been harvested, you have 2 loaves of honey, 2 honeycombs that you leave there in order that the bees can eat them and survive off them throughout the rainy season. So Gemara says, so therefore it's not muktzah. Gemara says, that's not true. Those honeycombs are left there for the bees to eat. That means you don't plan on using them. So they are muktzah. Gemara says, no, we're talking about where he intended to take those away. Normally they're left there and they're still there, but he had already said he intends to take them away. So Gemara says, if that's true, then the only reason that you're allowed to spread something over this hive is because you intend to take that honey away. If you wouldn't intend to take the honey away, it would be forbidden. So when the Mishnah is looking for a contrasting case where it's forbidden to spread the sheet over the hive, why does it have to go to a different halacha and say you have to be careful not to have in mind to trap the bees? That's when it's forbidden. You have a case right here. If you didn't have in mind to take the honey away, then it would be muktzah. Why do we have to go to the case of trapping? So Mishnah says, no, what this Mishnah wants to do is talk about this case specifically, where you have in mind to take the honey away and it's not muktzah. And wants to show that even within this scenario, there is a situation in which it would be usher to spread the sheet, and that's if you intend to trap it. So Gemara says, now, hold on a second. You've set up all your answers here in the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, who holds that beehives are muktzah. You could have just gone like Reb Shimon and said that beehives aren't muktzah, because Reb Shimon holds that beehives are not muktzah at all. They have a function. So why'd you go like Reb Yehuda? Probably because Reb Yitzchak holds like Reb Yehuda. But the problem, and you're trying to defend Rabbi Yitzchak's position here, the problem is that the rest of the Mishnah doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda, because the rest of the Mishnah says you have to be careful not to have in mind to trap the bees. That means that as long as you don't have in mind to trap the bees, it's okay, because it's a davar she'eino miskaven. That's Reb Shimon who holds that a davar she'eino miskaven is mutter. So obviously this is not Rabbi Yehuda, it's got to be Reb Shimon. So why are you trying to fit it into Rabbi Yehuda? So Gemara says, no. First of all, Reb Shimon would say that it's also here if you have, even if you don't have in mind to trap the bees, because it's a psik reisha. Psik reisha meaning it's for sure going to happen. If you spread a cloth over the beehive, you're going to trap the bees. So that can't be that we're talking about where the cloth will trap the bees. It's got to be that there are windows in the hive and the bees can escape. And what it's telling you is be careful that you don't cover up the windows and don't trap the bees. It's not telling you not to have in mind to trap the bees, it's telling you not to actually trap the bees. Gemara says that doesn't make sense. Why would it tell me not to trap the bees? I know you're not allowed to trap bees. That's a different halacha. What does that have to do with this? So Gemara says no. It's a chiddush that you're not allowed to trap bees. I may think you are allowed to trap bees, and that's because the issur of trapping only applies to things which are generally trapped, which people hunt. But people don't usually trap bees, and you may think that therefore there's no issur to trap bees. This can teach you that there is an issur. You are not allowed to trap the bees. It's issur derabanan to trap even things which are not usually hunted. Okay, now the Gemara brings the answer that we said before, and the Gemara then moves on. The Gemara goes back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said you're allowed to put a kli to catch drips on Shabbos. So the Gemara says that if the kli fills up, you're allowed to pour it out, and you're allowed to put it back. You're allowed to keep on pouring it out again and again. Now the Gemara quotes, it was an incident that happened, and there was another solution. The Gemara says that Abai had a mill, which was made out of clay, and the dripping on it was destroying it. He didn't know what to do. So he came before Rabbah, and Rabbah said, go bring your bed into that mill, and that way it'll be your living quarters. And the rule is that in your living quarters, you're allowed to move out something that is disgusting. And if you live there, so then you're allowed to move out the millstones, which are like disgusting, then you can move them out of the way. So it says that Abai didn't like this ruling. Even though his Rebbe said it, he didn't like it because he thought the halacha was you're not allowed to create a situation of a graf shalrei. The halacha is that you're allowed to move something disgusting out of your living quarters. That's the halacha of a graf shalrei. Graf shalrei means a container of excrement. You're allowed to move that out of your way even though it's mukta. So you say you're not allowed to create a situation of graf shalrei on purpose in order to give yourself an excuse to move it away. That you're not allowed to do. So in the meantime, his mill collapsed. So Abai said, you see, it's my fault. I should have listened to my Rebbe without asking and without being doubtful of his ruling. I deserve the fact that the mill collapsed. Now the Gemara quotes that Shmuel said that a graf shalrei, that is a container of solid excrement, and an avit of meraglayim, that is a container of liquid excrement, you're allowed to move them out to the trash, and you're allowed to bring them back empty. We should put in water when you bring them back empty, so they shouldn't be muktzah. So the Gemara says that people thought that you're only allowed to carry them out because there's a kli, but to actually carry the excrement itself without a kli, that's forbidden, because the heter of graf shalrei is only when there's a kli there, but just the thing itself, that's muktzah and disgusting, you're not allowed to move. But that's not true, because there was a case that happened where a mouse was found in Rav Ashi's spices, and he said, pick it up by the tail and get rid of it. So you see, you're allowed to just pick up the disgusting object and move it out straight. We now begin our next Mishnah, which discusses several halachos midarbanan that Chazal said that you shouldn't do certain things, not on Shabbos and not on Yontif. And the Mishnah divides it into three categories. It calls it shvus, rishus, and mitzvah. Now, shvus just means that it's an issur derabanan. Those isurei derabanan could be things which are just activities, which are not any reason you should be allowed to do them in particular. Now, rishus, Rashi explains, the Mishnah doesn't mean things which are totally voluntary. It means things which are a bit of a mitzvah. There's something you should do, but it's not an outright mitzvah. And then you have real mitzvahs, which you still shouldn't do because of gzeira derabanan. Now, what's on the list? So the list are as follows. You shouldn't climb a tree, ride an animal, swim in water, clap your hands, slap your hands on your thigh, or dance. Those are all completely optional activities. The following are what we call rishos, which are somewhat mitzvahs, but they're forbidden anyway. Judging, getting engaged to marry, that's being makdish a woman, chalitza or yibum. Chalitza or yibum are activities that are irrelevant when a woman's husband passes away without children and she's obligated to marry one of his brothers. Marrying the brother would be called yibum, and a procedure which releases her from that obligation would be called chalitza. Now, mitzvahs that he shouldn't do are to make something hektish, consecrate it to the Beitzah Mikdash, or do erchin, that's another form of consecration, make a cherem, another form of consecration, or take truma and meiser. Now these things are all asar and Yom Tov, the Mishnah ends off, but they are certainly kavachom, they're certainly forbidden on Shabbos. Now the Gemara gives the reasons for all of these. Climbing a tree, the Gemara says we're afraid you might tear off a branch while you're climbing it. Riding an animal, so first the Gemara says because we're afraid you may accidentally go outside the tchum, leave the forbidden zone that you're allowed to travel on Shabbos. The Gemara says if that would be true, that would mean that would be an Isser D'Oraisa if we're making a Gzeira to prevent it from happening. So the Gemara says no, so we'll give you a different reason. We're afraid you're going to take a branch off a tree in order to whip the animal. Not supposed to swim, the Gemara says we're afraid you may construct a raft. You're not supposed to clap your hands, slap your legs, or dance. The Gemara explains we're afraid you're going to bring in musical instruments and they'll break and you'll end up fixing them while you're playing. Now, things which are a bit of a mitzvah are judging. The Gemara says, why are you calling judging a mitzvah, a bit of a mitzvah? Judging is a real mitzvah. So says, no, it's not such a real mitzvah. It's talking about where there's a higher qualified judge than you. That's more of a mitzvah than this. In that situation, there's no real mitzvah for you to do it. The Gemara says being mekadesh, to become engaged, that's for sure, that's a mitzvah to get married and to have kids. The Gemara says no, referring to a situation in which the person already has children, he's already married, and therefore there's no specific mitzvah for that. Then the Gemara says yibum and chalitza, that's a mitzvah for sure. The Gemara says no, it's referring to where there is an older brother and the mitzvah is on him first. And for you, it's not a major mitzvah, it's just a bit of a mitzvah, not a real mitzvah. Now, why are all these things asr? The Gemara concludes because you may end up writing. All these involve written contracts, and therefore you'll write something, and therefore you shouldn't do any of it.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.